Hello and welcome to Fireside Fairytales. My name is Rory and you are watching Varietal Literature's YouTube channel, a cozy little corner of the internet for narrative. And what we're going to do here tonight is we're going to read old folklore and fairy tales and specifically about Cornwall or Cornish traditions here and Christmas. So hopefully that interests you. Sorry, my mic is being a little weird. Anyhow, if you don't want to watch a man adjust his mic for 2 minutes, you can look down in the description below if this video is no longer live, and there will be timestamps for the stories. You can jump ahead to whatever story interests you the most. We're going to read 2 tonight. The first is a very short one called The Old Sky Woman. It has a connection to the second story, which is the much longer one about the little cake bird. Anyhow, still feels like this a little off. I'm a shambles today, folks. There we go. Anyhow, if you are watching this live, though, you can join in the live chat, which has a little crop of potatoes already growing up. And I see we have the famed, or better put, fabled witchery in there. We don't see all that often these days because they're usually busy on this night. So it's very good to see witchery. We also see Uncle Kitty, GS, Jum Store, and Tammy Morelli. I'm sure others will trickle in. All right. So tonight, as I mentioned, we are looking at Cornish Christmas tales. I'm going to look at 2. One is more about winter. One is very explicitly about sort of Christmas traditions. So very broadly, the big thing in sort of Cornish folklore are piskies, which we have talked about before. This book calls them piskies. We would probably call them pixies. And they, they're little people. We tend to think of them with wings, but to be honest, I don't find any real reference to them either having wings or flying. That could just be this collection. There might be different renditions, things like that, but so far as I can tell, that's not necessarily a feature. Because when I think of a pixie, I think of a little person with sort of almost dragonfly wings, but I think that's partially informed by that hoax that was done at the turn of the century where they supposedly got pictures of fairies. Anyways. Genera says 35 degrees Celsius isn't that hot in response to witchery. Yes, because witchery is in Australia. It's summer there. Uncle Kitty says it's been a hell of a week. Well, I hope it's only improving. Okay. Let's get a little bit of coziness here. So yeah, we're going to look at 2 tales tonight. The first one is about a very short one about like what one of those explanations of the natural events, specifically snow. And then the second one is a longer tale written in very much in the style of not so much collected oral traditions as the era that this book was published. Now, the book we're going to read from is called North Cornwall Fairies and Legends. It is a book you can get for free on Gutenberg, if you know about that. There. North Cornwall Fairies and Legends, which of course is an Ennis Tregarthen's book, which means that we are getting elements of their language choices and so on. Anyways, the point is, Old Sky Woman is a very sort of folkloric kind of tale, and I think for people who are regular viewers of the stream, it won't stand out in any way. The second story is what I think in modern terms we would consider overwritten. Now, that's not necessarily a criticism. There is a reason why it was done that way. I just don't know how well it's going to play in a hyper-edited digital environment. We'll see how you feel about it. But it is very concerned with its atmosphere, is what I'll say. Hello, Lizzie. Good to see you. All right. Well, there's no reason to waste any more time. Gonna have some tea. And if you're drinking anything, of course, let me know in the chat. I'm always curious to hear. Our first tale of the night is called The Old Sky Woman, and it comes to us from North Cornwall Fairies and Legends, a collection by Ennis Tregarthen, who is, of course, old. You can get this book for free on Gutenberg if you want to read it yourself. When winter brought the cold north wind, and the snowflakes began to fall, the little North Cornwall children were always told that the old woman was up in the sky plucking her goose. The children were very interested in the old sky woman and her great white goose, and they said as they lifted their soft little faces to the gray of the cloud and watched the feathers of the big sky goose come whirling down, that she was a wonderful woman. And her goose must be a very big goose. I want to climb up to the sky to see the old woman plucking her goose, cried a tiny boy. He asked his mother to show him the great sky stairs, but his mother could not, for she did not know where the sky stairs were. So the poor little boy could not go up to see the old sky woman plucking the beautiful feathers out of her big white goose. Where does the old woman keep her great white goose? Asked another child, with eyes and hair as dark as a raven's wing, as he watched the snow-white feathers come dancing down. In the beautiful sky meadows behind the clouds, his mother said. And what is the old sky woman going to do with her great big goose when she's picked her bear? Queried a little maid with sweet but anxious eyes. Stuff it with onions and sage, her grandfer said. And there's a bit of a sketchy drawing there, sketchy literally, not in any metaphorical sense, of the old woman tossing her up in the clouds over a small town. It's very zoomed out. And she's tossing the feathers that would become snow down. What will she do with her great big goose? The little maid asked. Hang it up on the great sky goose, Jack, and roast her for Christmas dinner, her grandfer said. Poor old goose, cried the little maid. I don't believe the old sky woman would be so unkind as to kill and pluck her great big goose, was said a wise little maid with sunny hair and eyes as blue as the summer sea. Winter sky is the sky goose's molting time, and the old sky woman is sweeping out the sky goose's house with her great sky broom, and the white goose's feathers are flying down to keep the dear little flowers nice and warm till the north wind is gone away from the Cornish land. Perhaps that is so, dear little maid, her grandfer said. So there's a couple of things you'll notice on the style here. And I haven't read enough Cornish folklore to know if it's something inherent to the folklore or if it's something inherent to this collector. But you'll notice that it tends to be on the sentimental side and more anecdotal, where it's very immersed in its environment. I'd be curious to read other Cornish collections to see how much it stands up, how much that sort of feel is there. People are talking about Max Miller's Turkish Delight video. I saw it as well. It sounded great. I like Turkish Delight, period, but he mentioned something that I didn't know, which was that a lot of Turkish Delight in North America is made with gelatin, which makes it more gummy, and that apparently the original stuff is not that way. And of course, being a celiac, I can't just go down to random shops without controls and hope that they don't have wheat in there somewhere. So I was considering making it, but then as I watched that video, he described that it takes 3 hours of constant stirring to make, and I was a lot less inclined. Not to mention, I also would need to find musk and afford it, which I'm not able to do. Sorry to hear things are tough, Uncle Kitty. Alright, so in that story, the basic idea is we get this idea that snow comes from an old woman plucking goose in the clouds. And then the kid proposes this idea that maybe she's just sweeping out the down and the goose is a pet. It's quaint, sentimental kind of story, but I do like the imagery of it. Janera says, can you use a stand mixer? Only if that stand mixer can somehow be placed over heat, which mine can't. I was thinking about, like, is there a way to make this work? Sounds like an old-timey punishment for children. I think it's more likely just peasant work. Yeah, he did say you could use any flavor, that's true. But Turkish Delight has a pretty specific flavor. Like, you can flavor it however, but part of what I like about Turkish Delight is its flavor. It's very unique. That rosewater musk thing. But I do really like Turkish Delights. Alright. Our next tale is the longer tale. But it is a very cozy tale. And if you're trying to figure out a way to sort of immerse yourself in what is going to be a very descriptive tale that doesn't really have like a big twist or anything. It has a bit of a twist at the end, but it's not life-changing. I would encourage you to just sort of treat it like an experience. Like you're in the room with the people as things happen, because that is really what this prose is intended to be. Yeah. Don't listen to it like you might a normal story, and I think you will get more out of it. Our next tale is called The Little Cake Bird, and it comes to us from North Cornwall Fairies and Legends. And it is about a cake at Christmas. And there's a picture, not a drawing here, of the moors of Cornwall that I imagine was taken when this book was made, like collections. There's another picture of a hut later. And again, it's a picture. This is not a drawing. On the Tregoss moors, where in the long ago King Arthur and his noble knights went a-hunting, was a quaint old thatched cottage built of moor stone, and in it lived an old woman called Tamsin Tredenick, and her little granddaughter Phyllida. It stood between Castellan and us, a great camp-crowned hill, and the far-famed Roche Rocks. It possessed only one room, which fortunately was fairly large, for it had to contain most of old Tamsin's possessions, including a low wooden bedstead, an old oak dresser, a hutch for the grail, a coarse flour of which she made a bread for herself and little Phyllida, and her spinning wheel. At the side of the cottage was a small linhay, or outhouse, the door of which the old woman always kept open in inclement weather, that the wild creatures of the moors might take shelter from the cold and from the storms that swept over the great exposed moorland spaces. Tamsin was very poor, could only earn enough to pay the rent of her cottage and to keep herself and little grandchild, who was an orphan, in grail bread and coarse clothes. This she did by spinning wool, which she sold to a wool merchant at St. Columb, a small market town some miles away. She was advanced in years and getting more unfit to spin every year, she told herself, and the less wool she spun, the less money she had to spend on food and clothes for herself and Felida. But poor as she was honest and good, and so was her little orphaned grandchild. They seldom complained when things were at their worst, and there was no grail left to make bread, or money to buy any. And they told each other that they had what better most people had not, wide moors to look out upon, and pure moorland air, fragrant with moor flowers, to breathe into their lungs, and little birds to sing them most the year, and dear little piskies to laugh outside their window in the dusk when they were very wished. And there's a picture, again a picture, not a drawing, of a little thatched hut in Cornwall. I assume in Cornwall anyways. These pictures didn't really come with a lot of very clear references. It's wild that would be considered impoverished. It's like a mansion by our terms. Tamsin was a child of nature, and she loved the big lonely moors, gorgeous with broom and gorse in the springtime and fading bracken in the autumn months, with all her simple heart, and so did little Felida. They loved all the moor flowers, even the dollar blossoms of the mint and the nettle tribes, that made those great lonely spaces so wonderful and so full of charm. There was not a flower that broke into a beautiful life on the moors, but had a place in their heart. They were their near and dear relations. They said, and as for the birds and other creatures that lived in the moorland, they were to them, as to St. Francis, their brothers and sisters, and even the piskies, the Cornish fairies, had a warm place in their affections. Not a great way from Tamsin's cottage was a large pisky circle, where the Tregoss piskies danced when the nights were fine and the moon was up, and often when they danced, the old grandmother and her little grandmaid would come out to the step of their door and watch them. By the way, a pisky circle here is basically a fairy circle. They can be made of a few different things, but traditionally it's mushrooms. They're naturally occurring. They are a real thing if you've never seen one. Whether they house fairy parties or not, or whether stepping into them means that you can't step out, or any of the stuff around them, I'll leave for you to decide, but they do actually occur. They could see the pisky circles quite distinctly from the doorstep, and the pisky lights which the piskies held in their hand when they danced. But they never saw the piskies, for the dinky men, as Felida called them, were very shy and did not often let themselves be seen by human eyes. The old woman and the child never ventured near their circle. When the small people were having their high flings, partly from a feeling of delicacy, and partly for fear of driving them away, the dinky men were as touchy as nesting birds, Tamsin declared, and said that if either she or Felida spied upon them when they were having their frolics, they would perhaps forsake Tregoss Moor, which would have been a great misfortune. It was lucky, she said, to have the small people living near a house, so she and her grandchild were content to watch them dancing from a respectable distance. The place where the piskies made their circle was very smooth and soft with grass. The circle lay upon the close, thick turf, like a red gold ring. Behind the circle was a small granite boulder, and above the boulder was a big furze bush, which burnt like a fire when the furze was in bloom, and there were little yellow hammers sang their little songs, year in and year out. The Tregossmore Piskies were quite nice for Piskies, and took a great interest in Felida and her old grandmother. They never tried to Pisky lead them into bogs and streamworks, of which there were many on the moors, nor set up Pisky lights to slock them into the Pisky circle, which we must confess they did to their betters when they had the chance. It's probably worth me explaining that, right? Piskies, fairies in general, one of the things that they supposedly would do is lure people to their death, usually. Sometimes to disappear, but we can assume death, in the form of lights over boggy water or whatever else. It's the will-o-wisp thing that you see in other Celtic traditions, Irish, I think it is. But that's what they're referencing when they say Pisky lights here. They're talking about, Pisky leading. They're talking about tricking people into falling into water and stuff that will kill them. They were ever so sorry when they knew the Grail hutch was getting empty, which somehow they always did, and that Granny Tredonik, as they called her, because Felida did, had no money to buy Grail to fill it. And they hastened to the cottage and peeped through the window and keyhole to see if they were looking wished. And if they were, they would begin to laugh in order to cheer them up and make them forget how hungry and sad they were. For a Pisky's laugh is a gay little laugh, and as unfettered as the song of a lark. And anybody hearing it is bound to feel happy and gay no matter how wished he happens to be before. Perhaps that is the reason the old saying, laughing like a Pisky, is so often quoted in the Cornish land. Old Tamsin and little Felida always felt better when the dinky men came and laughed outside their door. Their laugh acted like a charm on the old woman, and often after the Piskies came and laughed, she laughed too, because she could not help it, and she would forget her aches and her pains and would go to the spinning wheel and try to spin. She generally found she could, and soon spun enough wool to buy Grail to fill the Grail hutch. Tamsin suffered from rheumatism. And when the weather was very wet and raw on the moors, her hands and feet were crippled with pain. She could not spin at all, and not even the Piskies' gay little laughs could charm the pain out of her. One autumn and the beginning of the following winter was unusually wet, and the old woman's rheumatism was very bad, and what was worse still, the dinky men went away from the moors. Where they had gone she did not know, and fervently hoped that she and Felida had not offended them in any way. The hum of the spinning wheel was as silent as the grave. The Grail hutch was empty, and they had to feed on berries like birds. When things were at their worst, the clouds let off raining. The weather brightened, the sun shone out. The little brown Piskies came back to the moors, finding out how matters were in the little moorland cottage. They came outside the door and laughed their gay little laugh once more. They laughed so much and so funnily that Granny Tredonik, weak as she was, couldn't help laughing to save her life. And when they saw her rise up from her chair and go over to the spinning wheel and make the wheel whirl, they were delighted and laughed again. The weather not only changed for the better, but warm, soft days came, and the yellow hammers and the black and white stone cuts must have thought summer had come again, and they sang their bright little songs, and the larks went up singing into the blue of the winter sky, Tamsin felt better than she had been for months, and became so well and cheerful, with the brighter weather, the music of the birds, and the free laughter of the dinky men, that she was able to spin from morning shine till evening dark. And very soon she'd spun all the wool she had. She sent it in a farmer's cart to St. Colombe. The farmer's man took it for her and brought back a great big bag of flour and some more wool to spin. But when that was all paid for and the rent money put aside, all her earnings were gone, which made the good old woman very sad, for she wanted to make a little Christmas cake for Felida. Christmas was on its way, and Felida, like most children, looked forward to it. Why, she could hardly have told, except that it was the great festival of the Nativity, and that Granny was always told her of nice Christmases she had when she was a croom of a child, and that her mother always made her a Christmas cake with a little bird on top to remind her of the great white birds which sang when the babe was born. When Christmas drew near, Felida could think and talk of nothing else but the beautiful Christmases Granny had had when she was a little maid, and of the Christmas cake with the little bird on top her mother had made for her a few days before Christmas, as she and her grandmother were sitting down to their dinner of grail bread. She said, "Christmas Eve will soon be here now, Granny. Do you think you can make me a little Christmas cake with a little cake bird on top like those you had? Ever such a dinky cake and ever such a dinky bird will do, Granny," she added. And all the old woman could do was shake her head. "Just to see what a Christmas cake tastes like and a little cake bird looks like." "I would gladly make ye a cake and a little bird," said Tamsin, "if only I were rich. But I'm afraid I can't afford to make ye in a dinky one. You can't buy sugar and spice and other things to make a cake without money, and I ain't got no money, not even a farthing." "Haven't you?" cried little Felida, her sweet child eyes full of tears. I'm so disappointed, Granny. I did so hope you could afford to just a dinky cake." "I'd hope so too, child," said the kind old woman. "Never mind. I'll ask the Piskies to come in and order you a little dream cake and a little dream bird." "What's a little dream cake, Granny, and a little dream bird?" asked the child. "The Piskies used to come in through the keyhole to pass over the bridges of children's noses. And when I was a little maid like you, to order their dreams, it would be ever so nice if they passed over the bridge of your nose and ordered you a little dream cake and a little dream bird." "But you can't eat the cakes in your dreams," said little Felida, "and you can't hold little dream birds in your hand." "Can't you?" cried Granny. "That's all you know about it. I'll ask the dinky men to come through our keyhole to order our dreams the very next time they are outside our cottage." "They're outside now," said Felida. "I hear them laughing. Listen, Granny." And the old woman listened, and she knew that the child was right, and that the Piskies were outside their window, for she too heard their laughter. "The dinky men be there right enough," said Tamsin, "and they are tickled about something by the way they are laughing." "Perhaps they heard What you said about them asking them to come in and order me a little dream cake and a little dream bird, suggested the little maid. I shouldn't wonder, laughed Granny. And I'm sure they'd be willing. I'll ask 'em now. Getting up from her wooden armchair, she went to the door and called softly, Little Piskies, are you here? But the Piskies made no response to the old woman's question, save but a little gay laugh. If you be there and can hear me, said Tamsin, I want you to be so good as to come through my keyhole on the evening of Christmas Eve, and pass o'er the bridge of Felita's nose, and order her a little dream cake with a little dream bird on top, and I shall be so obliged to you if you will, for I'm too poor to make the child a real cake and a little cake bird. When the old woman had said all this, such a burst of laughter broke out in the winter air outside the cottage that Felita rushed to the door and looked out, but of course she could not see the dinky men. But their laughter was more than enough to tell her that they were there, and Granny said she was sure they had heard what she asked, and would do it gladly. And as they stood on their doorstep, they heard the sound of tiny tripping feet going away from the cottage in the direction of the Pisky Circle, and as they followed the sound, they noticed how bright the circle was on the soft green turf. And then there's a picture here. Let me make it a little bigger because it is a nice picture. This is a drawing. Unlike the other ones. Let me just make it a bit bigger. And it's a drawing of the old woman holding her hand up to her ear to listen outside with a face of consternation, and an excited little girl across her table from her who looks eager to get out of her chair and check. It's all in black and white. Sort of maybe ink, maybe pencil. It was a perfect day, one of those very rare days we are privileged to have once or twice in December month. And the moors were full of charm. The many pools on it were full of light. The boulder near the Pisky Circle was diamond bright in the sunshine, and above it the furze was already breaking into golden blossom. The purple had pulsed out of the heath, and the pink from the ling. But each little sprig was a marvel of brown, and showed up the silver lichen that splashed the brown. The bracken was brilliant in warm tones of orange and gold. The brambles were every shade of crimson and red, and the haze on the moors was like the bloom of the hearts, which still supplied food for the birds on the hills. In the direction of Roche, where the great Roche rocks stand in lonely solitude, 680 feet above the level of the sea, with the ruins of the little chapel dedicated to Holy Saint Michael on their summit, a lark went up singing into the blue. For larks, as most observers of nature know, are seldom out of song. The yellow hammers were as bright as the brightly colored bracken, and sang their cheerful little lays from bramble and bush, and the streams rippled over the moors. And there's a picture of it there. This is a picture, I believe. You can see it's a strange high rock, and then it has ruins upon it. The old grandmother and her little grandmaid stood on the doorstep, taking in the quiet beauty of the moors. They even went out onto the moor and turned their gaze towards the Roche rocks. to see if they could see the little sky bird. After listening 10 minutes or longer to the lark and other birds, and to the piskies laughing, they returned to the cottage. Fine weather seldom lasts long in winter time, and when Christmas Eve came, it was bitterly cold. A bitter wind blew over the moors from the north, which brought snow in its wake. And Felida said the old woman was up in the sky plucking her goose and throwing down the feathers as fast as she could throw them. The child, who was healthy and strong, did not mind the cold, and she liked watching the feathers of the great sky goose swirling down on the hills and moors, but she was afraid the dinky men would not come over the snow to order her dreams. But her grandmother told her that she was certain the small people no more minded the cold than she did, and would be sure to come in through the keyhole when they were in bed and asleep. If Felida did not mind the severe weather, Tamsin did. She could hardly keep herself warm in spite of a great fire that blazed on the hearthstone. Whatever else she and the child lacked, they always had a good fire to sit by, for the moors supplied them with furs and other firewood. And as it grew towards evening, the grandmother told her little child about Christmas, as was her wont whenever Christmas Eve came around, and why they were told to keep it as a hallowed time. She also told her of Christmas cakes, taken hot out of the oven on Christmas Eve, and Christmas birds on top of them, which had made her Christmas so bright in those faraway years when she was young like Felida. Granny's tales of long ago were of absorbing interest to the child, who almost forgot that the dinky men were coming in order to order her dreams that night. When the day had gone and night had come, Tamsin banked up the fire on the hearthstone, and then she and Felida went to bed. The old woman knew that the piskies would not come in through the keyhole until they were in bed and asleep. The child and the old grandmother slept in the same bed, the latter at the head and Felida at the foot. The head of the bed was against the wall by the side of the hearthplace, and Tamsin, as she lay in deep shadow, and only her white nightcap could be seen. Wow, did I stumble on that? But Felida's charming little face was toward the hearth, and the fireshine fell upon it. The child had fair, smooth skin and clear-cut features. Her nose had a beautiful bridge. Her hair was thick and wavy and of a deep red gold, and only a little redder than the pisky circle, and her eyes, when they were open, were the soft sweet blue of the Cornish tors when the skies were grey. The red peat and furze fire, like a master of magic, made the interior of the poor little moorland cottage look quite beautiful. And the rough walls that went up to the brown of the thatch, where they caught the fireshine, glowed like the small people's lanterns. The old dresser, which stood by the wall facing the hearth, looking as if it were painted in fairy colors, and the china on it glittered like the boulder near the pisky circle. And even the grail hutch, a unique piece of furniture often seen in Cornish cottages, was turned into a thing of beauty, was painted orange color, and its little knobs were black, to which the shine of the fire gave depth and tones and undertones. Fireshine is a really good word for this, by the way, and it's not one I never thought of. By the side of the bed where Felida slept was a fiddleback chair, and on its seat lay her little blue week-a-day frock that added to the quaint and beautiful picture. Only a small part of the cottage was in shadow, and this intensified the brightness of the room where the firelight held sway. the cottage was looking its brightest, and was as warm as a Zam oven, which means apparently half-warm oven, like not full blazing fire. When a gay little laugh came through the keyhole, and a merry little face peeped into the room. In another minute, a dinky man came out of the keyhole and sat on the wooden latch of the door and gazed curiously about him. He was ever so dinky, but as cheerful-looking as a robin, in his bright red cloak and his quaint steeple hat. The face under the hat was almost as brown as an apple pip, and only a shade or two lighter than his whiskers and beard, and his queer little eyes were full of laughter and fun. "Are the little maid and her granny asleep?" called a voice through the keyhole as the dinky man sat on the latch surveying the room. "I think so," he answered. "They are still as mice when Madam Puss is close to their hole. You are safe to come in." "Then in will come," cried the little voice, and in the twinkling of an eye a tiny little fellow dressed in green came through the keyhole and pushed off the dinky man sitting on the latch, who fell on his head on old Tamson's lime-ash floor. Scores of little whiskered piskies, some in steeple hats and red flowing cloaks, some in green coats and red caps, came through the keyhole, and when they had swung themselves down by the durn of the door, they looked towards the bed. "I'll get up on the bed and see if the little maid is really asleep," said one of the piskies, and he climbed up to the top of the fiddleback chair close to the bed and looked down on the child. "Is she asleep?" asked the other little piskies eagerly. "As sound asleep as a seven sleeper," which apparently is a moth, so I really don't understand this reference, by the way, answered the dinky man. "And so is Granny Treadenick," sending his glance to the head of the bed. "Get up on the bed as soon as you like, to order the little maid's dreams. The sooner the better. We are powerless to do harm after 12 o'clock, being the night of the birth." It's Christmas Eve, the birth of Christ, in case you've lost that thread. Which would be fair, because it did spend a page describing a chair and a fireplace. "But we've come to do good, not to do harm," cried the piskies one and all, "and we will begin at once." They scrambled up the legs in the back of the old fiddleback chair and were on the bed in a quick stick, and took their places near the sleeping child. Some sat all in a row on the edge of the patchwork quilt. Some sat or stood on the pillow behind the child's bright little head. Others were low down on the pillow, and one blinking little pisky perched himself on her arm and sat cross-legged like a tailor. "I'll be the first to order the little maid's dreams," said one of the piskies sitting on the edge of the quilt, and scrambling up, he stepped on to Felita's nose as light as feathers, which the old sky woman had flung down on the moors, and as he walked over the bridge, he said... And there's the picture, but this is the picture from the thumbnail for the video. And what it is her lying in the bed. Might be a little hard to parse when it's small. I'll make it bigger. It's a drawing of her lying in the bed, surrounded by piskies. Although I do wonder if this artist read the description, because she's supposed to be in the foot of the same bed as her grandmother, but I don't see how that's possible here. Maybe you guys parse it differently. But I see the chair. So they must have read some of it. Maybe I'm just not parsing it right. Yeah, it's a very beautiful picture, for sure. The art in this book is very good. Well, it bounced me way back for whatever reason. There we go. Repeating that last sentence, though. "I'll be the first to order the little maid's dreams," said one of the piskies sitting on the edge of the quilt, and scrambling up, he stepped onto Felita's nose, as light as the feathers which the old sky woman had flung down on the moors. And as he walked over the bridge, he said, "Dream, little maid, dream that you are wide awake, and that you and Granny Treadinick are sitting at a table covered with a cloth as white as pisky wool," which is cotton, I forget the name of it, not cotton grass, but, the white fluff you see on whatever. "And that in the middle of the table is a lovely cake made of the finest flour and fairy's cow's cream, and sweet as your dream, and small people's spice, and everything nice, and kneaded and mixed and done in a tricks in a little dream bower. And on top of that cake is a dinky bird, with wings spread out, all ready to fly." Felita dreamt as she was ordered, and in her dream she saw the cake, and that it was a beautiful cake. And the little cake bird was a sweet little bird. "What a handsome cake!" she cried out aloud in her sleep. "And the little cake bird is a dear little bird, and it looks as if it can fly and sing." And she laughed so heartily that the Piskies laughed too, and one of the dinky men turned head over heels on the patchwork quilt out of sheer delight. That the child was so pleased with her beautiful dream cake and the little dream bird. "Dream that Granny Treadinick is as pleased with the cake and the cake bird as you are," said another little Pisky, stepping on the bridge of Felita's nose, "and that she thinks it is even better than the cakes which you were made for her when she was a croom of a child. And the little cake bird is more like a real bird than those that were on top of her Christmas cakes." The child dreamt as the Pisky ordered, and much beside that the dinky man never thought of ordering. In her dream, she not only heard her grandmother say what a beautiful cake it was, and that the little cake bird looked like a real bird, but that she said, "We must cut and eat it, the cake, but spare the little cake bird." And in her sleep she saw the old woman, dressed in her Sunday gown and cap, lean over the small oak table and cut her such a big slice of cake that she cried out in amazed delight, "What a great big piece you've given me, Granny!" And her laugh was as happy and gay as a Pisky's laugh. "But I must not eat this all myself. I must crumble some of it for the little moor birds, and put a piece out on the doorstep for the dinky men. It isn't a dream cake, Granny, but a Christmas cake, and it has a little Christmas bird on top." The Piskies look at one another with a peculiar expression in her little round eyes. And when the child spoke of putting a bit of her Christmas cake on the step of the door for them, and one said, "My dear little maid," and another said, "Pretty child," and one little fellow with a beard reaching his feet cried, "Oh, how kind her to want us poor little pixies to have part in the Christmas joy." And one little dinky man whispered, "Perhaps it is not true what the old widow says. After all, we are not good enough for heaven, nor bad enough for hell. The child does not think so, evidently, or she would not be so anxious for us to share her little Christmas cake." And the Pisky, who sat cross-legged on Felita's arm, uncrossed his lean little legs, rose up and stepped onto her nose, and as she walked over its bridge, he said ever so tenderly, "Dream, sweet little Felita. Dream that you shared your cake with the dicky birds. Put a piece of it on the doorstep for the dinky men, which they will treasure as long as there are any dinky men." The child dreamt as she was ordered, and when she put out a bit of cake on the doorstep for the Pisky, she saw in her dreams a crowd of dinky men in quaint little green coats and caps as red as barony berries. I don't think I said that correctly. And tiny fellows in red cloaks and green hats come and take up the cake with solemn faces and bent heads and carry it away over the moors towards the Pisky circles. When they had gone, she stood on the doorstep looking out over the moors, white with the feathers the old sky woman had thrown down. Then she lifted her sweet little face to the sky and saw it was free from clouds and full of stars. And then she lifted her, what she thought were chiming the wonderful news of the Nativity. She was so happy listening to the music of the Christmas stars that she forgot she had not tasted her cake, till a little piskie sprang on her nose to turn her dream. "Dream that you are come over to the table and eating your cake," he said, slowly passing over the bridge of her nose. "How can I dream when I'm out here on the doorstep, listening to the ringing of star bells?" murmured the child in her sleep. "I wonder if the dinky men like listening to the star bells' music. They're ringing up there in the dark because the babe was born and laid in the crotch." "We shall never get her to dream our dreams if we let her stay on the doorstep," cried the piskies, looking strangely at one another. "We never had such trouble to make a child dream our dreams before." "Dream your poor little granny feels the cold from the open door," said a dinky man, jumping on Felita's nose with all its weight, which caused her to jerk her head in her sleep, and made the dinky man lose his balance, and over he toppled on the heads of his tiny companions sitting at the bottom of the pillow, near the child's soft white neck, much to the amusement of the other piskies and his own. They laughed so much, including the wee fellow who was heavy-heeled, that he could not order the dream, and a piskie, when he could stop laughing for a minute, jumped up and stepped onto Felita's nose, and as he passed over the bridge, he said, "Dream that you shut the door on the cold in the sky goose's feathers and come back to the table." And Felita reluctantly dreamt as the dinky man ordered. And in her dream, she saw herself sitting at the table facing her grandmother, who was munching a bit of the cake and smacking her withered old lips. "This is a lovely cake, children. We must eat every crumb of it, for we shall never have such another." Felita was glad her granny liked the cake. She began to eat the generous slice the old woman had given her, and as she ate it, she thought it was so delicious that she must go on eating cake forever and ever. "I shan't want to eat grail bread after this," she said, laughing out loud in her sleep. "I shall always eat cake made of fairy cow's cream and every good thing." She was enjoying her dream cake so very, very much in her sleep that the dinky men would have liked her to go on eating, but the quick ticking of Tamsin's old clock told them the time was flying, and they had not yet finished ordering her dreams. "Dream, little Felita, dream that you and Granny Treadneck have eaten all the cake, but there's nothing left but the little cake bird," said one of the dinky men, passing over the bridge of her nose. "And that Granny says the little cake bird is yours." And Felita dreamt all that. And in her dream, her grandmother said in her old voice, "The little bird on the top of the cake belongs to the child of the house, and Felita is the only child in my little house. Take the cake bird, Felita, my dear." And Felita took it and held it in her little warm hand. And as she was holding it thus, a piskie stepped lightly as a ladybird on her nose, and as he passed over its bridge, he said, "Dream, Felita, dream. Dream that your little cake bird is alive and wants to fly and sing." And the child dreamt that the little cake bird was indeed alive, and was fluttering in her own little warm hand, and then it flew out of her hand and up to the thatch and began to sing a wonderful song. "What is my little cake bird singing?" asked Felita in her sleep. "It is singing. It is a fairy bird," said the dinky man, passing over the bridge of her nose, "and that is going to sing with other little fairy birds in the dinky people's land." "I don't think my little cake bird is singing. It is a fairy bird, and going to sing in the dinky people's country," said the child in her sleep. "Its song is much too happy and beautiful for that. What is it singing? Please tell me. I do want to know. Can't you tell me?" she asked as the piskies looked at one another. "Ah, I know what its song is about.
My little cake bird is singing a little song, and it is a little Christmas bird, and was on top of a Christmas cake. Isn't it a lovely song? It has changed its tune now, and is singing a golden song about the babe who was born on Christmas Day in the morning. Ah, I'm a little Christian child, and I know. Listen, listen, she cried, clasping her hands and lifting her sweet child face to the thatch. Isn't it wonderful? It thinks it is a little golden bird, and one day will sing with the great white angel birds Granny told me about.
Somebody far greater than we little piskies is ordering Felita's dreams, said the dinky man one to another, which are much more beautiful than we can order.
Just then old Tamsin's clock struck the midnight hour, and the piskies got off the bed, went across the room, and climbed up the dern of the door and out through the keyhole on the moors, and in a little while they were hastening over the snow-covered turf to the Pisky Circle, which was a big round door to the dinky people's land under the moors. Told you it was a longer one. There's a lot of debate about what the bird is made out of. I don't know. Baking is so of its time. It's hard to say. Like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's something I could have looked up, but I didn't think to do that. Yeah. Witchery says, have you seen those Japanese snowbirds? They look like little blobs. Yeah, I have. They're very cute. Janera says, I wish I could find a tabletop RPG group. Discord D&D isn't for me. After COVID, we used to do in-person D&D, but after COVID, it's all Discord and Foundry. Lizard Bros also likes the snowbirds. GS says, my mom used to call the meringue birds on top of the lemon meringue pies birds. Well, that's a good point. Meringue was a thing at this point. Probably the more reasonable thing for them to have made. GS says, it was delightful, Rory. I'll have to listen to it again, just rife with illustration ideas. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Witchery points out that Fantasy Grounds is free now. Yeah. Fantasy Grounds is free. Although I will say Foundry is, has an upfront cost, but it has quite the third-party module market. Some cost money, but most don't. But it is, I will say, it's a question of how much work you want to do and how much learning you want to do. Like, Foundry is very powerful. You can border on a video game if you put the time in. Not a very detailed one, but there's animations and stuff like that you can put in. It is the one I use. I have put that time in, but it was a lot of time. And it's probably not worth it to somebody who mostly wants to rely on imagination and just set up a common map. For stuff like that, I would say like Owlbear Rodeo or Fantasy Grounds, that's your jam. GS says, I googled Japanese snowboards. They are little blobs. Yeah, they really are little blobs. Tammy says, good night, Rory. Thank you for the great stories. The voices were terrific as usual. Hope everyone has a wonderful week and happy holidays. Well, thank you very much, Tammy. Also, congratulations on I didn't mention at the beginning, on the weight you've lost and the good news from your doctor. I'm sorry that things have gone bad for you, Uncle Kitty. I hope it's nothing too dire. I know that you've had a lot of procedures going on. It's always good to see you. Jumpstore says Japan has all the cute and futuristic stuff. I mean, we have cute stuff. We just are used to it. They also have massive hornets and rather terrifying other things. Everyone lives, so with luck, it'll be okay. I'm glad to hear that, Uncle Kitty. All right. Genera says, I'll probably check them out. I'm still undecided on virtual tabletops. I mean, it's all trade-offs. It's all trade-offs. Like, I have a bunch of Dwarven Forge, if you know what that is, which is not cheap. And it's super cool to be playing in three-dimensional, detailed maps like that. But it is very limiting in the medium. You can do a lot of things in a digital format that you can't do elsewhere. Jumpstart that says, this was fun. Thanks for the stories, Rory. It made me hungry. It made me hungry too. As I was reading it, I was like, oh, I didn't have dinner. I'm hungry. I want a cake. I don't have a cake. Oh, I see. Witchery says, I also mentioned Fantasy Grounds mostly because it's free now, price being the first problem for a lot of people. Yeah. I think basically what they said was they don't make much money off the upfront payment on Fantasy Grounds. They make their money off their market, which you don't have to engage with if you don't mind doing the work. People are talking about more cute creatures. Well, I know that that can go on forever, so I will let you folks talk. And as for me, thank you very much, Uncle Kitty, GS Witchery, Genera, Lizzie Rose, Jum Store, Tammy Morelli, anybody else I might have missed. I apologize greatly. And if you are out there lurking and you don't chat, that's fine. I hope you enjoyed the stream otherwise, or podcast, I guess, if you're listening to it on YouTube Music. Yeah, I appreciate all of you, and I hope that you find some joy this week. I will see you next week. Is next week my last week here? I don't think so. Ooh, we go up to the 23rd. I should be able to do one on the 23rd. No, I think I have 2 more weeks left till I take a little break. Anyways, I will keep the fire warm. You folks have yourself a good sleep.